Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. As Bob has stated, my name is Sam Salami, and I'm privileged to have been given the opportunity to serve the citizens of the city of Dearborn as the chairman of the Board of Ethics. I serve with a group of fine individuals who are no stranger to public service or hard work. I mentioned City Attorney Debbie Walling, who is with us today. You can hold your applause until the end if you so choose. Human Resources Department, Valerie Murphy-Goodrich. Our legal coordinator, Deanna Orner. Commissioner Mary Bruno. And Commissioner Anita Abdullah, which I suspect she's not here with us today, but we do wish her a fast recovery. She's been suffering some health problems. Ladies and gentlemen, we live in a world that assumes more complexity and sophistication with every passing day. In such a world, one would hope that ethical and moral considerations will continue to be an important and integral part of our daily interactions and an essential governing principle of our institutions. It is unfortunate, however, that the recent past has witnessed an ever-increasing number of scandals and financial debacles that were primarily fueled by greed and corruption. As we have seen through financial collapse on Wall Street, a governor in Illinois who tried to sell a Senate seat, the affairs of Kwame Kilpatrick closer here to home, even a police officer trying to fix the traffic tickets. These incidents do not only affect the people directly involved with them, but they tend to demoralize an entire department and cause the citizens to lose faith in our government. Here in Dearborn, we continue to work hard to ascertain that the moral compass is not lost, and will continue to guide our public and the private sectors. We strive to ascertain that transparency, moral decency, and ethical considerations continue to be observed and practiced by all of us as individuals and institutions. Therefore, in this continued effort to accomplish these objectives, we rely on the expert advice of outstanding professionals in the field of public service and ethics, including the individual we have today to give the presentation. Ladies and gentlemen, today it gives me great privilege to introduce to you a distinguished and renowned expert in the field of ethics and public law. He is a principal in the Detroit office of the law firm of Miller Canfield. He is a former member of the Livonia City Council, a three-time graduate of the University of Michigan, earning a bachelor's degree in economics and political science in 1979, a law degree in 1982, and a master's degree in public policy studies in 1983. He is a past vice chair of the Southeast Michigan Council of Governments. He also serves on a Municipal League Attorneys Committee formulating ethics ordinances and charter provisions for Michigan municipalities, and is a past recipient of a Crane Detroit's Business Annual 40 Under 40 recognition. He is also the recipient of many awards, including the Regional Ambassador Award from the Southeast Michigan Council of Governments for leadership and service in fostering intergovernmental cooperation. Also, he is a recipient of the Special Award of Merit from the Michigan Municipal League in recognition of his work in support of municipal government in Michigan. He is an accomplished publisher who authored many articles dealing with public law and ethics. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome Attorney Michael McGee.
Thank you for that kind introduction.
Welcome, Blake.
I want to make it very clear to start that the 40 under 40 was a really long time ago. I couldn't help but notice, too, when I came in, and we're all enjoying our lunches and sandwiches, and since this is a little show on ethics, I happened to look over at the sign on the wall, no food or drink allowed, so I guess we have dispensation a little bit. Well, you have heard a little bit about me. I just will observe before I get into the presentation that something I try to say at the beginning when I talk about this topic. I am a sinner, in a sense. I'm not any particular moral expert or that sort of thing. In fact, I got into this in part, as you've heard. I was an elected person in my hometown of Livonia, and that, of course, makes me a politician, right? And you've also heard that I'm a lawyer, so to be perfectly frank, you're going to hear 45 minutes of ethics from the lawyer-politician. Whose plan was that, actually? But I do want you to know that you can believe everything I say. You have my word on it. Okay, so, do we? Uh-oh. There we go, wrong button. So this is an ethical quiz to start with. You are, let's do the desert island. You're on a desert island with Muammar Gaddafi, the Joker, and a lawyer. You have a gun that only has 2 bullets. Whoops. Let's go back. What do you do? Shoot the lawyer twice, somebody said. That's exactly right. Good answer. That's the way we start. I frequently, you'll see when I go through this, I sort of accumulated a fair amount of survey data over the years. And one of the questions that's frequently been asked by Gallup and others, really since the 50s, is a question about how we sort of feel about one another as neighbors. So this particular question, pretty current, generally speaking, would you say that most people can be trusted or that you can't be too careful? Can be trusted. 42% can't be too careful, 39% basically a statistical tie. Now, I will say that I sort of chose this particular question with these numbers because they were so shocking to me. When Gallup has done this, as I say, going back to the late 50s, 60s, the numbers have kind of ranged between kind of a high of 70% people can be trusted, and it has been a diminishing number over the last few years. But the last Gallup poll I saw still was up in the low 50s. This is the closest thing that I found to a statistical tie. I don't know what's going on in the state of Missouri that evidently makes people a little bit less trusting of one another, but I do think this is representative of the way in which the culture continues to evolve and continues to develop. Now, Gallup has done, and you've probably seen in the press, a survey of what people feel are ethical professions, which professions can be trusted. I've thrown up numbers here from the last 3 times they've done this. The order of the top, in this case it's 9, but the order of sort of the top rank doesn't really change too much. Nurses have been, I think, number 1 since about as long as this survey has been done. The asterisks are folks that are in there every couple of years, but to kind of give you a sense. The druggists, the grade school teachers, doctors, police officers, and so on, clergy. Not a big surprise, and those numbers have been really pretty steady. Now, at kind of the other end of the spectrum, this is where you find the lawyers, not surprisingly. At the other end of the spectrum, you have the following professions. And I'll let you, sort of enjoy that at your leisure. I will note, of course, members of Congress, which for a while, kind of I was a little worried that lawyers might fall below members of Congress. But we've got a good edge on them now. Lawyers are 17 and Congress is only 9, so we've got a good lead. Business executives have taken a hit. One thing I would ask you to observe is that when it comes to elected governmental officials, there's a relationship here you can see. Local office holders generally, and this is quite consistent, tend to score highest among the office holders, followed by state, followed by the national legislature. So that's good in a sense that local office holders, and I think we can use that as a proxy for how people feel about government employees generally. Local office holders are still sort of the best. They're held in the best regard of people that are in government. The bad news is that the number really has dropped a lot just within the last couple of years. We're now down at 20 for local. And so I tell my friends who are still on council, when they get excited by the fact that people trust them more than people tend to trust state legislators or members of Congress, I say, yeah, that's the good news. The bad news is they don't trust you as much as they trust the 6 p.m. news anchor or the newspaper reporter. So, you know, take it with a grain of salt. Now, I'm a sports metaphor person. I talk in sports metaphors. You'll see before this is over. People probably recognize this gentleman. Certainly people of my age recognize him. Former head coach of the Green Bay Packers, Vince Lombardi, led the Packers to the first 2 Super Bowls. That was what, 45 or something years ago, 46 years ago? And the Lions haven't been yet. But in any case, Vince Lombardi was well known for saying you'll all know, which is, I'll start it, winning isn't everything. It's the only thing, right? That was sort of Coach Lombardi's mantra. Winning isn't everything, it's the only thing. And that's really kind of, you know, important to success. We have to be very interested in winning, and we have to be dedicated to winning. We have to make a commitment to succeeding in whatever it is that we've chosen to do, whether it's local government or football or what have you. But we just need to be aware that if that is sort of the mantra of the culture, winning isn't everything, it's the only thing, that does carry with it kind of those pressures that are going to cause people perhaps to go a little bit too far. You may have heard in the introduction, I'm a graduate of the University of Michigan, and so it didn't really take me very long to put this slide up here when it came out. But the point is, you know, by all measures, the coach involved here is a pretty good guy, but sort of succumbed to the pressures of that relentless pressure to win. And it's not just that we face a pressure in our own lives to win. We also define winning to be a pretty high standard. So there's an equal opportunity there. I put a picture of the Wolverines getting hammered last year on New Year's Day. Tom Izzo, very successful coach at Michigan State, and the hockey team, the Red Wings, they're up at the left. Are there any hockey fans in the audience? Red Wings fans? Sure, right, we all are. Spartan fans, of course, yeah. Maybe even a couple Michigan fans somewhere. But these are 3 really successful programs, right? I mean, Spartan basketball, it pains me to say this, but I mean, a top 10 national power. The Red Wings have won more games over the last 20 years than it's probably humanly possible to win, just about. And the Wolverines, notwithstanding our recent reversals, you know, actually a pretty good, pretty successful football program over a long period of time. So now ask yourselves, last year, the Wings got knocked out in the playoffs, I think, by San Jose. The Spartans didn't go as far in the NCAAs as they would have liked to have gone. And Michigan, you know, was sort of occupying a total different space altogether when it came to the bowl analysis. When you think about your friends who are fans, or even if I think myself, is it more common to hear, well, they played hard, and what a good program they have overall, and really it was a pretty good season. You know, we sort of won more than we lost. You know, we'll get them next year. Yeah, there's some of that. But I mean, how much of the press is filled with, you know, Wings choke, or you know, Spartans fail, or Wolverines implode? You know, we're not satisfied in a way with kind of a record of winning. You got to win right now, right? I mean, it's what did I do yesterday is the thing that counts. And that puts even more pressure because that raises the bar. It's not enough to win as much as the Red Wings win. It really isn't, you know? If they don't win the Stanley Cup, even the players, Chelios a couple of years said, boy, what a lost year. You know, I think they had 110 points that year almost. I mean, it's really a high standard for winning, and that puts a lot of pressure on us. So what does that do sort of in real life? This fellow, David Callahan, is a writer who has sort of looked at this question of what this relentless pressure to win does to people on an ordinary day-to-day basis, and he basically wrote a book about it called The Cheating Culture. It's been out, I think, 5-6 years now. And in essence, he concluded cheating is everywhere. On Wall Street, and by the way, he wrote this before the credit crash of 2008, In Major League Baseball, journalism, politics, college admissions, it's everywhere. It's accepted as a way of life in many, many quarters. If you really are interested in the topic, you can order this from Amazon. You'll have it in a couple days, and I'll bet you can get a used copy now for about $3. It's depressing reading, I have to tell you. But also when you read it, you'll recognize situations that you see from time to time. Callahan in this book basically concludes that inequality in the market in essence means bigger payday, bigger paycheck for quote-unquote winners than for people who aren't and who face less security, that the bottom line focus on profits and continuing efficiency creates tremendous pressures for people to cut corners, that our values, this one he's really gloomy about, I'm not sure I quite agree with this one, but this is Callahan. American values have changed since the 70s. We're a little bit more cutthroat than we used to be. I'm not sure I agree with that, but that's his view. And that cheating takes on a life of its own, and this is really important. That he argues that there's sort of a tipping point, that if folks conclude that everybody's doing it, then they sort of feel like they don't want to unilaterally disarm, they don't want to let the cheaters get ahead, so you begin to cut corners a little bit yourself just because you don't want to be left behind. That's his conclusion. So okay, shift gears now and talk about our children, because after all, it's all about the kids. There's a guy who used to teach law at Wayne State University by the name of Michael Josephson, who later, when you go through law school, before you're actually admitted to practice in the bar, you have to take another exam. You have to take the bar exam, right? And so Mike Josephson created a company which trained law students after they graduated from law school, trained them to do a test prep for the bar exam. He was one of the first people to do this. He did this 35, 40 years ago. And this was a big winner, so he ended up selling his company for millions and millions and millions of dollars to the people that do the SAT and the ACT and that sort of thing. And he took the money and he decided he needed to do penance, so he created an institute on ethics, because he said, I let so many people in to become lawyers, I've got to do something to try to improve the ethical culture of the country. So he created this institute, Josephson Institute on Ethics. You can find it easily on the web. And his main focus is in the ethics of young people, and in particular through sports, but the ethics of young people and how we can try to improve the ethical compass of young people. And he starts sort of by doing surveys of high school students, 2,000 or 3,000 high school students every year or two, and asks them a series of questions. And I've sort of thrown up some of the recent ones that he asked at the end of last year. So a high school student is asked, true or false, agree or disagree, my parents want me to do the right thing. Everybody says yes. Of course, my parents want me to do the right thing. How could you suggest otherwise? Have you told a big lie? There's a separate question about little lies, but have you told a big lie to your parents in the last year? 80% say, yes, I have. And as the parent of 2 kids in high school, I can assure you the other 20% are lying. Have you told a big lie to your teachers in the past year? 61%, yes, I have lied. Have you cheated? Wow. Have you cheated? Not quite 2/3, but that number is creeping up there. That number, 59, is as high as I've seen it. That used to be kind of in the low 50s. Have you cheated in sports in the last year? I thought this one was really interesting, that it's okay to cheat on the exam for a lot of folks, but I wouldn't cheat on the field or in the competition. I'm not sure what to make of that, but it's a significant difference there. You can see 60 to 20 almost. Have you stolen from your family in the last year? 1 out of 5. Yep, I've stolen from my family. Then one that really gets my attention, agree or disagree that in order to succeed in life, you must be willing to lie and to cheat. 39% of the folks, of the young people surveyed in 2010, last fall, said, yes, you have to be willing to lie and cheat in order to be successful. 2 out of 5. Now, the good news is that number is actually a little bit down. That number used to be sort of like 43 or so at least it's kind of, the last time around was trending in the right direction. The bad news is, at least for us fellows, they broke it out by gender this year, and almost half of the boys say, oh yeah, lying, cheating, no problem, I got that covered. Girls, it was only about 1 in 3. So the girls, once again, are sort of leading the way on this thing. Oh, and are you satisfied with your own ethics, including the 40% of you who say you have to lie and cheat to succeed? Yeah, I'm pretty good with that. 92% I'm satisfied with my own ethics, okay. And then finally, he throws in a question, have you lied on the survey? And a quarter of them say, yeah, I lied. So it's really a little depressing again. Don McCabe is a founder of a similar group in North Carolina, and he has done studies of to what extent is plagiarism in college taking place because of the tremendous ability to find everything that there ever was on the internet. And there are a number of studies that show it's probably 50-50, something like that, or the surveys. But McCabe says that it's likely much higher because students who cheat aren't exactly the most credible sources. Basically, he's finding the same thing that Josephson is. So what happens now? So we graduate from high school. We go to a good college. Maybe we go to a professional school, and maybe we get a really good job in accounting, and we move our way up, and you actually become the CFO of one of the world's great companies. And one of the world's great companies is like not doing so well at the moment, and there's a lot of pressure to make sure that we hit the earnings requirements that we have to report every quarter. And so maybe you cut corners on the numbers, figuring it'll get a little bit better. Well, that can, in an extreme case, lead you to jail. This is Scott Sullivan. He was the CFO of WorldCom. He was in prison, I think, from 2002 to 2009. He's been released from prison now. Question at the trial, was there ever an occasion when you said, numbers be damned, I'm not booking it. I won't lie. No, Sullivan testified. I went along with hitting the earnings per share question. So your desire to hit the numbers to make sure that we're going to look good to the outside world overtook your obligation to obey the law and your loyalty to WorldCom. I knew it was wrong. I knew it was wrong. Just like I told Josephson in the survey 10 years ago. I knew it was against the law, but I thought we'd make it through. Rationalization, justification. Was this guy the devil? Is he like inherently evil? Nope, I don't think anyway. I just think this is a person that grew up in sort of the ethically conflicted culture that we had. Winning's really important, and he thought that he could kind of see it through and make it better. Here's another example of the same thing. The fellow on the right, David Duncan, who's a little bit older than I am now. Same thing, good family, good upbringing, good school, good education. Went to work for an accounting firm, Arthur Andersen, that for all intents and purposes doesn't exist anymore. Arthur Andersen had the reputation for being the most ethical accounting firm among accounting firms, I think it is fair to say. Arthur Andersen himself, the person who was the founder, earned that reputation by turning work down and saying to potential folks that he would be asked to do the audit for, if they wanted him to book it the wrong way, he wouldn't do it. And he had that reputation, was able to build a business based on the reputation. And what happened to Andersen? It blew up. Why did it blow up? Well, because you had a number of folks who were doing a lot of very lucrative consulting work for Enron. And Dave Duncan here is the quality assurance officer, and he was supposed to try to keep things recorded properly. He's in a different office from the people who are doing the actual work for the company. And by all accounts, he tried pretty hard inside the institution to get him to do the right thing, but in the end, he kind of went along with it, and in this case, I instructed people on the engagement team to follow a document retention policy, which I knew would result in the destruction of documents. Not the devil, under a lot of pressure. You actually can get this book on Amazon, by the way. It's been out now a number of years, again, before the credit crash, but I brought it back. Jay Walker's written a book, The Complete Wall Street Book of Ethics. It's about 150 pages. When you open it, all of the pages are blank. The lawyers love to poke fun at accountants and at the financial people because we have so few opportunities to poke fun at anybody else. We're so ethically challenged. So you've heard some of these expressions. Mr. Lincoln, nearly all men can stand adversity, but if you want to test a man's character, give him power. You've all heard Potter Stewart, what you have a right to do does not equal what is right to do. So in a sense, they sort of reflect sort of the better angels of our nature. Damon Runyon, great American author, I love this quote when I found it. You can become a winner only if you are willing to walk over the edge. I don't even know what that means, but it sort of sounds kind of cool, but it also sounds like maybe it's not exactly the same thing as Potter Stewart's talking about. I'm not sure. So what is, how do we, what can we glean from this, and what are some of the words that we use? In this case, integrity, which is what this is all about. A bright law professor at Yale says that integrity really has three components. They're all very important. The first is just figuring out, being able to tell the difference between right and wrong. Now, I would say that David Duncan and Scott Sullivan had no trouble in the first. They knew what was right and wrong. Acting on the knowledge of what is right and wrong. And I would say that both of those guys actually acted too, tried to do the right thing for a period of time. And then finally saying openly that you are acting on your understanding of what is right and wrong. And this is the hardest thing. This is the hardest thing for all of us. This is, certainly the thing I try to teach my kids, but the fact of the matter is to actually be the person that has the guts to stand up in a room full of people and say, wait a minute. That's a really, really hard thing to do. But it's really a core part of what integrity is. It has to be more than just words on the page. The Enron policy, respect, integrity, community, excellence. My favorite is Tycho, the ethics compliance officer who was indicted for fraud. Beautiful. So, if you sometimes sit back even when you know that you should speak up, and we've all done this, this is a very public example of bad things that can happen, and most of the people in this room probably remember this event. This is the Space Shuttle Challenger that was destroyed by an explosion of the fuel tank about 73 seconds after it launched. There was a long investigation after the Challenger disaster in which NASA's management process was looked at by a lot of people. And what they discovered was that the engineers who worked on the solid rocket boosters, which were the things that actually failed, ended up like a blowtorch on the other tank, which caused it to explode. The engineers kind of knew that this might happen, or at least they had a suspicion that this might happen, because the Challenger was launched in very cold weather. It was actually below freezing in Florida that particular day. And so what happened was the solid rocket boosters are very long, and they're shipped by train, so they're shipped in parts. Before you launch them, they're actually put together with a little seal. If the seal breaks, which is what happened here because it froze, the rocket fuel, instead of pointing out the bottom, points to the side, and that kind of put the blowtorch on the fuel tank to cause it to explode. So the engineers were very worried about this, and there was a big conference call, probably 30 people on the phone in Houston and in Kansas City and in California the night before the launch to kind of talk about what are the risks here. And in essence, you had sort of NASA saying, look, safety is number one. Safety is always number one for us. Oh, by the way, did we tell you we're under a lot of pressure to launch this bird because this is the one with the teacher on board, and the president's kind of been a little embarrassed that this hasn't happened yet, and that makes us embarrassed, and we've had to delay it a couple of times, so we really, 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 really want to go. But safety is still first, of course. Safety is always still first. But you better have a really good reason why we can't go if you're going to tell us we can't go, because we're going to be really mad at you. So the engineering folks basically had two groups. One were sort of the relationship salespeople that were very, very anxious to make NASA happy because that's a big account, How many people buy solid rocket boosters? So, I mean, that's a very important customer. And you had the engineers within the company saying, we're just nervous about this. These things have been known, to nearly fail at nearly these temperatures. And the salespeople said, but can you find a case of where it really happened? Well, no, we can't actually show that it's ever really happened. Well, then it's going to be perfectly okay. And the engineers kind of said, okay, okay, all right, we can't say for sure that this thing's got a problem, so we'll just kind of, give up the fight. This is what happened. So why do we bother? Why does the city buy your lunch? Why does the city force you to come and listen to a lawyer for an hour on a beautiful sunny day when you could be doing something else perhaps with your lunch hour? We have certain objectives. Try to manage risk. Not very many of us are in a situation where there's the risk of something really extraordinarily terrible like a space shuttle disaster happening. But there are risks in all businesses. Try to build cooperative values within the organization, enhance the reputation. I mean, that's clearly important from the Josephson numbers in terms of how people perceive government. Improve civic positioning, which is really another way of enhancing reputation. So we're not a reporting company in Dearborn, although actually we are, because the city has to put information out on its website and the city has to put other information out in various public forums. So in a sense, we're a reporting company. There's actually a dollar cost for all this. There's an organization called the Association of Certified Fraud Examiners, which has been around, I want to say, almost 20 years now. And they have tried to do a systematic evaluation of how does fraud occur, in what kind of organizations, and what can you do about it, what are the losses. And this is sort of some of their conclusions over the last year or so. They've looked at almost 2,000 cases in the 2-year period, 2008, 2009, and they estimate that when you add it all up, all of the fraud that happens everywhere in the U.S., it's about 5% of annual revenues, $652 billion. You know, that's a fair amount of money. The median loss is pretty modest, $160,000. Some cases $1 million or more, but many less. Some by accounting department employees, some by executive level employees, and the rest sort of scattered. So how does fraud, which you might think of as a lapse in ethical behavior, you know, how does fraud actually take place? Well, there's the three main things. You can lie, you can cheat, or you can steal. In the fraud area, lying is like what Scott Sullivan did with WorldCom. You misstate the numbers, and so then somebody relies on those misstated numbers and there's a loss. Corruption schemes where you try to use position, one uses position, or one uses insider knowledge, insider trading, that sort of a thing. That's the cheating. And then the stealing are the actual asset misappropriations, which are what they are. They're stealing or potentially misusing. So those are kind of the three big categories that they look at. So the most common one is stealing. About 90% of the frauds in the U.S. are stealing. Some of them are sort of conflict of interest, corruption, and some of them are lying, the financial statement fraud. The losses, you can see here, this, you know, there's a good chunk of them that are $1 million and up per episode, but really most of them are to the left and are quite a bit smaller. You know, the most common distribution there, about a third of the losses, between $100,000 and $500,000. The type of victim, this chart just shows that it's everybody in the economy, because they've broken the economy out by private company, public company, government, and nonprofit, and those percentages pretty much track the proportion of those enterprises in the economy. So yeah, you have more frequent fraud in a private company. That's because we have more private companies than anything. Public companies, government, nonprofit. So it's really kind of everywhere. The median loss, and I thought this was interesting for my clients in Michigan and elsewhere, the median loss for governments and nonprofits is around the same, around $100,000, you know, per occurrence. The size of the organization, and this is relevant for the reason why we're here, is it actually gets a little bit easier to perpetrate some kind of a fraud if the organization is a little bit smaller, is what the numbers seem to say. And that actually shouldn't surprise anybody, because there aren't as many checks and balances as there are in a larger place. Although if the place is very large, I think probably it's easier for people to sort of get hidden in the bureaucracy and that kind of a thing. Who are the perpetrators? It's basically everybody, you know, employees, managers, owners, or executives. Again, the proportions really more tell you what the makeup of the workforce is than that any particular segment of the workforce is better or worse than any other. Although the owners and executives, the heavy hitters, tend to make off with the most loot. There are some people that say, well, you know, if we just do a little bit better job in hiring, and try to screen out the bad eggs, that'll take care of a lot of this problem. ACFE would say, well, actually not, because 85, 86% of the folks who are caught do not have any prior record at all, so that wouldn't have done any particular screening. How do you find out about fraud that's going on in an organization? By far, employees are the source of tips, customers second, anonymous third, occasionally the vendor, and so on and so forth. Now this one I threw up here, and it's absolutely, I apologize, you can't read this in the handout, the numbers are too small. But what this chart's trying to show is, along the left side here are the types of behavior controls that an organization might try to apply, and how many of them in the total sample have actually applied it. And if they have the control in place, what's the median loss? And if they don't have it in place, what's the median loss? And then finally, what's the reduction? And I thought it was interesting that just having a code of conduct, which is a pretty easy thing to do, and in fact, because it's so easy, just about everybody has it, about 70%. For those that have just a simple code of conduct in place, the median loss is 140,000, which is a lot less, about 46.6% less, than where the control is not in place. So I think what this teaches, and this is one of the reasons why we're here, is people respond to leadership. People respond to good examples. If part of what Callahan says is true, that there's a feeling out there among a lot of people that they maybe want to do the right thing, but they feel like nobody else is doing the right thing, which makes them a little bit more susceptible to wrong decisions. What this teaches, and what these other things teach, is no, that doesn't have to be so. That if we can provide the leadership to give people the belief that the culture is such that if they listen to the better angels of their nature and they make the right decisions, conduct overall will improve. Everybody will be better off. Okay, so shifting just a little bit now into what are the rules that govern everybody here in the room. There are 4 principal sources of rules about ethical conduct in Michigan. 3 of them are state laws. One is the Dearborn City Charter, as far as you're all concerned. And Dearborn actually has a very robust charter when it comes to ethical guidance. It's one of the better ones. So, state laws. Act 196 is what's called the State Ethics Act. It has a series of thou shalt nots in the State Ethics Act, not surprising things about what it says. You shouldn't divulge confidential information. You can't represent your opinion as the government's. You can't use governmental property for yourself. You cannot solicit or accept a gift, loan, or thing of value tending to influence performance of official duties. That's a very subjective standard, as opposed to saying something like the state law could have said, you can't solicit or accept a gift, loan, or thing of value exceeding $25 in value, or something like that, for example. The state statute is more flexible than that. Tending to influence creates another set of issues about that's kind of in the eye of the beholder, but that's what the statute says. Can't engage in a business transaction in which you can profit from the inside information you may have. Can't accept employment or render services in conflict with your official duties, or be involved in negotiation or execution of contracts or other regulation of a business entity in which you have a financial interest. So financial conflict of interest, people have a good sense of what that is. Now, in fairness, I will say there is a division, and I think Deborah will recognize this, there's a division in the municipal world about whether this statute actually applies to local government officials and employees. The Attorney General has said that it does, but the Attorney General's view is not binding, and there are a number of municipal attorneys whose opinions I respect who have concluded, no, this really applies to state people and not to locals. When I am asked this question, I do the good lawyerly thing and I try not to answer it. And I try not to answer it by saying, does it matter? Because here's what could happen. If you get a call from, I don't know, maybe even a reporter that says something like, gee, we've gotten kind of a tip or some information about some behavior in which you were engaged in, and arguably it's against the State Ethics Act. What is your comment? It seems to me it's not a very good answer to say, the law doesn't apply to me. That just probably doesn't ring really well. So I think there's no downside to treating this statute like it applies to us, because frankly, this is all pretty standard stuff. So that's my advice to my clients on that one. There's a very similar statute that has to do with contracts in which the city would be a party if you are in some fashion have an affiliation or an association with the party on the other side of the contract. This statute will come into play. There is also the incompatible offices statute, which isn't strictly an ethics statute, but it has a bit to do with sort of duties of loyalty. This is more important probably for council people, elected people, although some of the commissioners in the room potentially. And basically what it says is you owe a duty of loyalty to the government to whom you are representing. And therefore, you can't be involved in some other entity in which that other entity has a contract with the city, because then you're on both sides of the contract. So again, pretty standard idea of trying to avoid conflicts of interest. There are lots of attorney general's opinions on this. I'm guessing probably 30, because there are all kinds of cases, so we don't want to generalize too much about it. But this is just to say, you know, it's out there. City of Dearborn Charter. City of Dearborn Charter, first of all, has, as I say, a very robust set of statements about ethical conduct and ethical guidance. And I think that is really to the city's credit. I know Macomb County, for example, just went through the business of drafting a new charter for that county. They've become a home rule county. And the Charter Commission, for whom I did some work, was very, very interested in what charter provisions they might look at and they might see as good examples for their charter. And their charter similarly has a very, very robust section on governmental ethics. And they looked at the Dearborn Charter, I will say, a fair amount. And if you were to look at the Macomb Charter and compare it to the Dearborn Charter, you'll see that there's a fair amount of overlap there, certainly in terms of the ideas. So I think that's worth everybody here kind of feeling good about. There are charters out there in Michigan, I don't know, 20 or 30 of them that have provisions like this, but Dearborn's really has some of the best. And I think that a charter is really a reflection of a community's feeling about itself and about how it wants to govern itself. And I think as a result, this says really good things about the city government and the electorate in Dearborn, that it is part of the charter and it is looked to as an exemplar for others to follow. So, you know, credit to Dearborn. So what does it say? It does have a conflict of interest provision. Refer back throughout the charter where you see these sections like MCL 15321, and there's a few others. That refers back to those state law provisions we were just talking about, so they are incorporated by reference. Basically, 3.1 is you have a conflict of interest, you have to disclose the conflict of interest. It goes to the Board of Ethics. The Board of Ethics, later on you'll see, of course, has the ability to issue opinions and so on. Specific reference to conflicts involving financial interest, definitions of how that works. I won't go through it in detail, but this is a good workable section. It puts people on notice as to what they should be looking for and provides a process for trying to resolve the issues. There's an anti-nepotism provision. The Board of Ethics is created, and there aren't that many places actually where there is a Board of Ethics. That's an even smaller number than the places that actually have charters. So again, you have a very robust infrastructure to actually do things like this and to try to do some training. The board's primary function is to render advisory opinions. It can conduct investigations with respect to the meaning and application of these charter provisions, establish its procedures, and importantly, the advisory opinions are to be published. I think that's a great approach because the State Ethics Board, for example, there is a State Ethics Board, which not many people even know about, and one reason they don't know about it is for a long time they never published their opinions. So if somebody went to the State Ethics Board and had a real question about should I behave this way or that way, and they got an answer, that answer never applied down the line to anybody else because you couldn't find the opinion. You know, here I think having a process where if the Board of Ethics issues an opinion, people then have guidance going forward, that's really a good thing. Political activity pretty much tracks the state statute in terms of one does not mix one's political activity with your governmental activity. No private use of city property, again, very similar to the state statute. And the penalties are up to 90 days in jail, $500, or both, although my instinct is that the real effort here is to try to encourage people to behave appropriately, ask questions, get the advisory opinions, and not be particularly punitive. So we come back to Callahan and the feeling out there that, gee, you know, is everybody doing this? Am I alone in this if I try to stand up and do the right thing? Am I going to be ridiculed for trying to do the right thing? I mean, that's sort of the worst environment of all. If you don't do it, the category of everybody will include one less person. And I'll go back to what I said a couple minutes ago. I am a strong believer that people respond to strong and affirmative leadership. So if you do the right thing, and if you stand up and say you are doing the right thing, and I recognize that's not so easy frequently, people will respond to that. People will follow your leadership. Not everybody, but there's a proportion of people that are really looking for that type of affirmative leadership. Therefore, your responsibility is to eliminate the appearance of impropriety in any of your actions. You know, be self-introspective about that. You're responsible for thinking through your actions, and to act with integrity, you have to speak up, you have to speak up, you have to speak up. My kids grew up sort of during the era of Harry Potter, and some of you will recognize this photograph as Albus Dumbledore, who was the headmaster at the school. And one of the lines I liked in this series of books was Dumbledore gives a speech at the end of one of the school years in which he says to all of the basically high school students, right? He says, look, the time is coming when every single person in this room is going to have to make a choice between what is right and what is easy. And you have to try to make the right choice. So credit to Dumbledore. I always end these presentations with a quotation from ancient Athens. This is the Athenian oath, which was a required oath to be taken by all of the citizens of Athens. I like it because these are the people that invented democracy. It hasn't really changed all that much in all of the years since, 2,400 years. Now, a citizen, of course, I was reminded recently, didn't include women, for one thing, didn't include people that didn't own property, didn't include any of the slaves that Athens had. But, you know, accepting apologies for 2,400 years of development and civilization, the ideas here, I think, are still quite good and are expressed about as well as I've heard them expressed. We will never bring disgrace to this, our city, by any act of dishonesty or cowardice, nor ever desert our suffering comrades in the ranks. We fight for the ideals and sacred things of the city, both alone and with many. We will revere and obey the city's laws, and do our best to incite to a like respect and reverence those who are prone to annul or set them at naught. We will strive unceasingly to quicken the public sense of public duty, that thus in all these ways we will transmit this city not less, but greater, better, and more beautiful than it was transmitted to us. I think that's a perfectly good set of ideas for everybody in local government to take to heart. And so I'll leave you with that thought. I appreciate your attention. I appreciate none of the sandwiches, or at least some of the tomatoes, having come this way while I was talking. And I'll be around in case anybody wants to ask any questions.